Happy Monday, What's the Juice fam, and happy Leo season in like a singular day from now. Thank goodness for my folks out there who are also astrology aware, astrology curious. We have just come through Cancer season, and I thought it would be fun to lie to myself and say that I was gonna magically get through Cancer season without a single cry, and I was holding it together. Like I thought I was a smooth cat and just had everything on lock. And then halfway through Cancer season, I started to get a little bit angry, and thankfully, because I've learned so much about my emotions over the years and my emotional regulation, which has been such a big part of my health journey, I now know that that's a tell for me, and that anger is not really anger. Anger is usually coming up for me when I'm sad about something underneath the surface. And sometimes all it takes when you're feeling that weird anger and pushing up against yourself on the inside where your own body is trying to hide something from you, all you really need to do is spend some time very much alone. And as soon as you are completely alone, there's like this unfurling that can happen with those emotions. And I had some really good cries this month, like some really intense ones. And I'm starting to embrace the beauty of that and like my quarterly get it all out moment. So I hope that you guys had a chance to do that this month as well. And if you've been extra emotional, that is why, in my mind, again, no scientific proof of this, but Cancer season always brings the tears. And I think it's very much needed. But now we get to move into Leo season and just shine and have adventures and lay in the sun and be a little bit bougie. So I'm very happy about that. And so I hope that this week's podcast finds you somewhere, maybe on a beach chair in your backyard, just getting some vitamin D, listening to some nice pods or some nice music. And I hope that this episode is a very fun one for you, because that's really how it felt to me. It was a practitioner to practitioner, but more so human to human, woman to woman, chronic illness struggler to chronic illness struggler, real world chat about health in a very tangible, kind of non-pretentious way. If you guys liked the episode with Shyla, who's a registered dietitian, I think you'll very much enjoy this episode with Fiona Smith, who's a certified nutritional therapy practitioner, because they are very similar to me in the sense that they are both part of this new wave of younger practitioners who are a little bit more in touch with kind of like the reality that we're living in now, where we have all of this access to information and functional medicine, and yet more and more people are confused. And it's nice the way that both Shyla and Fiona are able to wade through that information and misinformation and fads and trends and just talk person to person from their very own lived experience or client experience. And so Fiona and I, again, as two women who have struggled with several different chronic health issues and just a lifetime of symptoms, from digestive to thyroid to hormones to all the things, we really sat down and dove into the true underlying factors that matter the most when it comes to, quote, holistic healing and functional medicine, and how to break through the noise and start to actually implement the things that will matter most in your health journey in your life, especially when you're someone who finds it hard to actually implement and stick to healthy habits and routines. So we're going to talk a lot about thyroid health and gut health in today's episode from, again, a tangible lens, not a lens of take these 7,000 supplements or go on a gut healing diet or drink bone broth every day, but from a lens of what would make the most difference for you individually, and what can you start with today that is not going to be this extreme habit change that you will totally fail on in a week and then feel terrible about yourself and spiral. Fiona has this beautiful way of explaining how she works with clients where she trusts them to play an equal role in their healing. And when she's talking to someone about their symptom picture, their life journey, how they got to where they are today, because disease doesn't just happen overnight, she very much asks the individual, what do you think would help you the most in this moment? What do you think is playing the biggest role in your flares? What do you intuitively feel drawn to change this week, this month, etc.? What foods are you feeling like you need to either cut out or bring in higher quantities? What is your body saying? And she has this really wonderful way of teaching people tactics like symptom journaling and just even free writing, where we as the client, the patient, the human can start to dive into the well of information within us that already has a lot of answers for us around our own sickness and wellness before doing a single lab test. So I felt that this episode was very different from other ones that we've done because she takes that approach and she is so human focused and relationship focused, and she really wants you to develop that relationship with yourself. So in the lens of that, we're going to talk about gut health, of course, thyroid health, and we're going to specifically focus on nutrition in terms of nutrient density, how to hack your diet to just add a total bolus of nutrients that you wouldn't normally get in a really easy way that doesn't require very expensive superfoods and a ton of meal prep. We're going to talk about sneaking in nutrients for thyroid function, sneaking in nutrients that can help to balance some autoimmune symptoms because she suffers with Hashimoto's, so we focus a lot on that. We talk about foods that you may want to remove and why, specifically gluten, because I think that there's so much confusion around the gluten conversation. Do you have to cut it out entirely? Do you have to cut it out forever? Why can I eat it in Europe? Who is a candidate to cut it out? What kind of symptoms can it cause me other than just bloating that I might not be aware of? So we talk a lot about the actual mental health related symptoms that a gluten intolerance can cause, because a lot of people don't realize a reaction to gluten, even a delayed reaction, doesn't have to just be physical. Oftentimes it can create depression, anxiety, these feelings and thoughts of doom specifically, because it does have this autoimmune component within the brain for those who are sensitive and for those who do react to the gluten protein. So that was really fascinating. And she talks about how to do a true self-test of cutting out gluten completely and then bringing it back in after a period of time and kind of like what that looks like. And then lastly, of course, we're going to discuss ADHD because she and I both have ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was like 14 or 15 and given Adderall, and that just did not end well for me with the come downs at the end of the day for those who have been prescribed it and have tried it. It is really rough to manage. And now I realize I'm someone who's just very sensitive to stimulants. So of course, at the end of the day, I was like, I had no juice left and I really struggled. So I have been living my life with ADHD unmedicated for a very long time. And finally, I feel like now at the age of 31, Leo season, I'm finally starting to understand systems and even regulate my nervous system enough to be able to manage my life with ADHD. And I've developed all of these different hacks and kind of like brain tricks and workarounds and habits that have helped me to work with my neurodivergent brain and see it as a gift instead of a hurdle, when for my whole life it felt like a hurdle and I couldn't have a clean house for a single day. So Fiona and I talk a lot about that lived experience and specifically how we've been able to work around our ADHD when it comes to implementing healthy habits that we need to do as adults to heal from chronic illness, like feeding ourselves properly and getting all of these nutrients in, which can be very difficult to do when you feel like you're living in such a chaotic and disorganized brain. So she talks a lot about techniques for that. I think that's a really important and relevant topic for the health world because, again, we're given so much information about what to do, but a lot of us struggle with these brains that are not typical necessarily, and our brains work differently, and we need very specialized support and advice and systems and hacks to be able to stick to the changes that we want to make based off of all this great information. So that was a fun part of the episode. And it just, as you can see, kind of goes a little bit of everywhere. And it was, again, just a very real human conversation that I think I would probably sit down and have with a lot of you guys if we were to dive into our health journeys and what we've learned and things that can possibly help other humans out there. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Happy Leo season again. And I hope you guys are having a really wonderful summer and connecting with nature. And I'll see you next week. Okay. Are you ready?
We feel each other's emotions.
It's everything. It's living my life intentionally.
That's the message, right?
Absolutely. There's no difference between our mental health and our physical health. It's the same exact thing.
And without further ado, let's get juicy. Hi, Fiona.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I am so happy to have you here. You make me laugh so much
Oh, thank you.
with your TikTok. Someone messaged me this morning and they were like, she is insane and I love her.
Oh.
Like that's the energy that you give off. And we're going to get into so many reasons why that is. I mean, obviously you just have such a bubbly, wonderful personality, but you're also an ADHD girly like me.
Yes.
And you're like very ADHD rising. Like it presents for you.
Yeah.
And so you're able to communicate health information in a really funky, like high energy way that I think a lot of us who also have neurodivergent brains respond to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to talk a lot about being neurodivergent and being on a health journey and all of the things that involves. But I want you to start us off by just giving us a really concise rundown of the various conditions that you've dealt with and have been able to put in remission. Just kind of give us a background.
Yeah. So ever since I was little, like honestly, as young as I can remember, it makes me emotional to think about like having gut issues, like very severe gut issues. I grew up in a home that was like very water damaged, like mold was very prevalent. I don't think like mold was the only thing. Like that was the one, because I don't believe in that. I think there's like health is very multifactorial. But I grew up on like a lot of antibiotics, sinus infections, ear infections. Then when I got my period, like it was heavy periods, painful periods. Actually coming here, I'm supposed to start my period in like a day or two. And I have like period trauma because I'm like, I don't want to go to this interview and I'm passing out and throwing up from period pain because that's what it was for me. And when I was younger, I wasn't necessarily like as holistically minded. And I was like, just give me the birth control. Like give me anything that's going to make this level of pain go away. And it's funny because my mom has always been a little bit more holistically minded and she's a Virgo rising and she's a Cancer. She's very intuitive. And I'm passing out on the bathroom floor, like blacking out from pain. And she's like, I think you need to take fish oil.
Wow.
And I'm like, don't tell me to take fish oil. I'm in pain. Do you really think that's going to help with this level of pain? Like I kind of was like, just not like, the way I think then and the way I think now is just completely different. Cause I'm like, there's no way that that's going to scratch like the level of pain I'm in. But now, like when you look at the science, omega-3 and period cramps, like we know that helps. And so she intuitively knew, And so went on birth control. And like, I like to say I traded period cramps and acne and like a lot of those issues for like mental health and worsening gut issues and depression, anxiety. Like a lot of people deal with that going on the pill. And so that brought on like a whole other host of symptoms, like thyroid related symptoms of like dry skin, hair loss, like very rapid weight gain. And like more so, like thyroid, and then diagnosed with Hashimoto's later. And so that was kind of like the spiral. Like that's how everything kind of came about. And now I'm at a place where I would say like, I'm not perfect. I never want to portray, because I feel like a lot of practitioners, like we're still working through, like I'm still detoxing from mold right now because I lived in a moldy apartment last year. But yeah, I would say like 90% of the symptoms that I dealt with, like the food intolerances, food sensitivities, hair loss, acne, painful periods, heavy periods, sleeping 13 hours a night and like not understand. Like I remember being in college, I remember being 21. My friends would go out like on the weekends and I'd be sleeping and people would ask, what did you do this weekend? I'm like, well, if I'm not working, I'm sleeping. Like that is what I'm doing. How do you have energy to do anything else? And I think for anyone listening that's younger, like in their teens or 20s dealing with health issues, it can be really hard because you look around and it's like no one else is going through that and it can feel really isolating. So that's why I got into what I do now. And I don't know if that was
I love that.
Super concise, but that's how I kind of got here.
I think that's as concise as you can get with such a laundry list of symptoms and ways that your body was speaking to, as well as diagnoses that kind of like those gut issues very well could have turned into an autoimmune condition like Hashimoto's. We know that it really starts in the gut.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Your story makes perfect sense to me. And I think so many people listening are like, yes, that was me. I think we have a whole generation, those of us who are the chronic illness girlies, who care enough that we're listening to this show right now and that we spend so much of our free time researching health information and trying to get to the bottom of our stuff. We are the girls who grew up and, like you said, from a young age, something was just so off with your gut and your digestion.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is the story for so many people, for so many young kids. I mean, I remember being in elementary school, middle school, wondering why I was so sensitive to certain foods or why I was always in pain and my friends weren't. And again, that history of antibiotic use. So I think we have like a generation now of gut health girlies that have grown up like this.
Yeah.
And then poof, we're in our 20s and we're diagnosed with whatever it is, IBS, Hashimoto's, PCOS, all of these different conditions. And our PCPs are kind of like, oh, well, that came out of nowhere. But we know that we felt it so young and so early. And where are the people giving us interventions for that first step?
Yeah. And I think in my experience in talking to so many other people with chronic illness, I think anyone who has experienced PCOS, endometriosis, like Hashimoto's, anything autoimmune, they can think potentially a decade back to like when they experienced symptoms. But maybe like at that point, you just kind of like shake it off or you just think it's normal. Like for me, when I was in college and I was sleeping 13 hours a night, I'm thinking to myself like, well, the reason I'm sleeping 13 hours a night is because I'm a full-time college student taking 18 credit hours, working 40 hours a week, like just trying to survive. And I'm like, well, that's why I'm tired. And I think that going at that pace kind of impacted the adrenals, which impacted the thyroid because just being in that chronic state of stress. But it's like, I think everyone with chronic health issues can think back to a time, even in childhood, like literally in childhood, when those symptoms started to pop up, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's something that I think so many people are resonating with. And because so many people listening are also dealing with this laundry list of symptoms.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you just have IBS, right?
Yeah.
Girls who have IBS, like, you had IBS as well?
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I was like formally diagnosed with. We don't just have IBS, you know, it's like it comes with joint pain, right? Like that could be one thing that it comes with. It comes with sleeping all the time and being like, why am I so tired when my friends are able to just party and do whatever and stay up till 3 a.m. studying even, but I can't function without sleep. It comes with being the depressed friend, being the anxious friend and feeling like there's just something different about your body, right? Which is something what we're going to talk about. But I think for those listening who resonate with this picture, who know they've had gut issues from a young age, it's one thing to know that could be what caused it, the original gut microbiome disruption. But what people are wanting to know is, where do I start now?
Yes.
So talk to us about, for those listening, where do they start?
Yes. So my perspective might be a little different because, and I know we were talking about this, that I think a lot of people want to jump to the deep end of the pool and they want to pay for a bunch of really expensive lab testing. And while there's a time and a place for that, I like to say there's gut health principles that every single person can apply. Every single person. Doesn't matter if it's SIBO, Candida, IBS-C, IBS-D, like the diagnosis. I mean, there is nuance. Like gut health is very nuanced. But I like to say there's certain principles that apply to every single person. And something I neglected for a really long time is the nervous system, the connection between the brain and the gut. Like the gut-brain axis is a bidirectional highway. So the brain is talking to the gut and then the gut is talking to the brain. And so for me, like personally, I've just started therapy and I'm like, wow, I probably should have been in therapy like 8 years ago. Like 8 years ago, I probably should have been in therapy. And even she asked me, she's like, how long have you had IBS? I'm like, since I was 5. And she's like, you've been in fight or flight since you were literally 5 then. Like that plays a huge role because when you think about it, when we're in kind of like a fight or flight state that maybe we've been in that state since childhood, you're not going to make as much stomach acid to break down your food, and that impacts digestion. It's like if your body thinks you're running away from a tiger, it's like the main priority is survival. The priority is not, let me take this hamburger and digest it into microscopic particles that your cells can use as energy. That's not high priority. So it's like you're going to be a little bit bloated, but you got out of the way of the tiger. Like survival is the priority. So at the end of the day, your body is trying to protect you. And I think nervous system regulation is honestly 50% of it. So for me, things like EFT tapping, meditation, like having different tools. Like right before I came here, I made sure I'm like not on social media the first 2 hours of the day. I have a blocker that I put on my phone because I think that can be very, very, very dysregulating. So I think having boundaries in place, I know that's not necessarily like a nutrition tip, but a really impactful lifestyle thing. So I don't know if that's something you wanted to dig more into.
I certainly do want to dig more into that, because I think it's fascinating that your answer to my question of like, where does someone with chronic symptoms and joint pain and you know, gut distension and IBS and thyroid issues start, you're saying go directly to the nervous system first. And I think that's something I'm hearing more and more from my guests and I'm seeing more and more in my life. But I think it can be hard for people to connect, like, what the heck is that going to do for me?
Yeah.
And even when you're saying, you know, your therapist letting you know that you were probably in fight or flight mode from 5 years old.
Yeah.
The question that comes to my mind is like, why are children experiencing such an overactivation of their immune system younger and younger?
Yeah.
And like, why are we seeing these gut issues in kids younger and younger? Like, I have a family member she's about to turn 4 and she's had really severe digestive issues from a young age. And thankfully her parents are like very, very aware of it.
Yeah.
And have done all of like the digging that they've needed to do for her. And with conventional doctors, they were kind of just like, yeah, whatever, give her a little Miralax, she's constipated.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people's story. But then when she went to finally a functional doctor, they thought to test her thyroid antibodies, because they're like, hey, constipation and thyroid.
Yeah.
And she's 4 and has has Hashimoto's.
Wow.
So who's to say that you didn't have Hashimoto's when you were 5?
Yes, exactly.
So why do you think this is like happening to us so young?
I feel like our generation, like people listening that are in their 20s, 30s, I think there's this piece of your microbiome gets passed down. So like the microbiome, like my grandma had IBS. My mom had IBS.
My grandma had stomach cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Severe digestive issues, same amount. Yeah.
So I think it's like one piece is that children being born today and like people listening in their 20s and 30s, like part of this generation, I think right off the bat, we don't have as robust of a microbiome as our great grandparents did. Yeah. It's like each generation, the diversity in your gut is like a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. And so we know if we look, and then maybe on top of that, we've got some sinus infections, some ear infections. We throw you on some antibiotics, and thank God we have antibiotics. There's a time and a place for them. But that's like a broad spectrum bomb going off. That's killing the bad guys. Like if we think of our gut like a garden, that's killing the weeds, but it's also killing the flowers. And we want like to fertilize the flowers. We want to give the flowers sun and light and not bomb them constantly. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so when you kill those flowers, that in and of itself can cause food intolerances, food sensitivities, constipation that makes you a hospitable host for parasites, like all of these other gut issues you hear people talk about on social media when you destroy the good guys, which are already so small, like so weakened. I think that just makes us a more hospitable host. And again, like that gut-brain connection, it's like the brain talks to the gut, but the gut also talks to the brain. Yeah. So I think right off the bat, we're less resilient. And I think also too, just like the way our society's set up, like we are so out of alignment with nature, like in 2024, where like we are just constantly surrounded by like artificial lighting and eating a diet of foods that are depleted in vitamins and minerals and out of the womb sometimes like put on antibiotics. And it's like, we're living in this environment that's the antithesis of health. Like it's the absolute opposite. It's a culture that promotes sickness. Yeah. So it's like, it's no surprise, but I think it's a complicated answer because it's multifaceted. Yeah. Yeah. It's no wonder we have to be so vigilant. You know, when I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, oh, this totally makes sense. Why we have to kind of be a bit, not health obsessed, but extremely health conscious in a world where health is not the norm, actually. And you kind of have to be the person who's looking at everything. Almost, I know that there's a lot of, critique around this in the conventional medical field and even with like conventional dietitians where it's like, oh, that can be orthorexic and you shouldn't be avoiding all this processed food and all foods can fit. But I think what we're not understanding is just that we really are at a place where the pendulum has swung too far. Mm-hmm. And so to be a healthy person, you have to work at it nowadays. There's a reason why we are so intense about this and why the folks listening, we know how hard we have to work to feel normal. Yeah. 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 And I think it was I think Michelle Shapiro actually made a post on that. Yes. Where it's like, you have to be a health nut just to be okay. Yeah. In 2024. Yeah. And it's like, I think, yeah, it's hard with the conversation around like all foods fit. And to a certain degree, it's like, no, you're not going to die if you eat an Oreo. Like, that's just not how it works. Like, you're not going to die if you eat processed foods, but you do have to be, when you think about the generations of that microbiome getting passed down from great grandma to grandma to mom to you, and then just being less, like having less robust of a microbiome and less resilience in our society, again, is just set up in a way that is illness promoting. Yeah. Like, even when I was living back in Ohio, I remember I was driving like to Southern Ohio for one of my friend's bachelorette parties. And I'm driving through and it's just like, there's no healthy options. It's like fast food, truck stop, Hardee's, McDonald's. Like there's not, like if you're traveling, I'm the weirdo that's bringing a cooler with me. I have my little hard-boiled eggs and like my bell peppers that I'm packing. Yes. And I enjoy that. But it's like, when you have chronic health issues, it's like, I would love to just roll through a drive-through and grab something, but I know that's going to put me to a flare for 4 days.
Yes.
So it's like balance looks different for different people, and that's okay. Like balance doesn't look one way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And someone who just has that robust gut and immune system from birth.
Yeah, they can tolerate
it. Who are, they're blessed.
They're more resilient.
It's really interesting. It's like people who had almost like, it's funny because my husband, Nick, he grew up in a very low income neighborhood, very low income family. They didn't really see the doctor, honestly.
Yeah.
And in a way, I almost wonder like how much the lack of medical interventions that he experienced at an early age has made him the insanely robust person who like,
wow,
he could eat a rock and digest it. Like it's unbelievable.
I joke with my boyfriend. I'm like, I feel like you could eat a chili cheese dog from the gas station and not utter a single fart.
Yeah.
He's just such a healthy, robust microbiome. And I think there's something to be said about like your constitution of health, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And like he came from generations where it's like they weren't taking a bunch of antibiotics. They were just kind of like, all right, what kind of like plant or tea can we do? Or,
out of
just
necessity.
Tough it out. Out of necessity. And I almost wonder like what kind of advantage that gave them, while there are also disadvantages that come with lack of access to medical care. But it's something to ponder. And I always wonder, constitutionally, there's something huge to be said. Yes. Some people are just stronger. I just have more of that congenital chi from their parents.
Yeah.
And I can look at my parents and even see like genetically, constitutionally, they're just not the finest specimens, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because we have so many medical interventions to this point where those of us who are not quite as genetically sound, myself being one of those, can use all these tools to like continue kind of thriving. It's really interesting. Like when you look at genetically and like epigenetically, I mean, I don't mean to sound cruel there, but it is interesting how probably, 1,000 years ago without antibiotics, with my parents' constitutions, they probably wouldn't have survived.
Yeah.
To have me. Yeah. But somehow they survived, had me, and I'm like even sicker than them. And it's like, damn.
That also might explain why, again, you had asked like, why are gut issues so prevalent? And like, why are these things so prevalent? It makes sense.
Yeah. Because like Nick's family and even himself, he would have survived without antibiotics. He did.
Yeah.
I most likely would not have survived as a child without antibiotics. So again, it's looking at that and how nature would have essentially like, killed me off back in the day, or killed my parents off to where I wouldn't even be here. So we're like kind of surviving it. Thank God we are. We're like crawling out of the trenches. We're fighting our genetics.
Right.
But we do just have to fight a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we get to have these conversations of like, hey, how was your fight? What did you do? Like what have you learned along the way? And how can you kind of pass those things on to me so that I can thrive and can even, perhaps epigenetically become healthier than my parents so that my offspring then get a better chance.
Right. Have you heard of the Pottinger's cat study?
No.
Oh my goodness. So the Pottinger's cat study looked at, I think it was either 3 or 4 generations of cats. And it was a poor study because it's like, 1, we're not cats. 2, they removed the adrenal glands of these poor cats. And they looked at the cats over like 3 generations. And so basically what they did is cats are like, their best diet, to my knowledge, is like raw, wet food. Mm-hmm. And so I believe in the study they fed, don't quote me, but I believe they weren't eating a diet that they evolved to eat is the point.
Yeah.
And so the first generation that ate what they didn't evolve to eat was fine. Like the first generation was fine. And then the second generation like had a few issues, but it wasn't a big deal. The third generation could not reproduce.
Damn.
Right. They didn't make it. And again, flawed study, because why did they remove the adrenal glands
that's weird.
of the cats? 1, 2, we're not cats. But it is interesting to think about and hypothesize our generation. When I think of my mom, my grandma didn't really eat processed foods. Like you have our grandparents that are living to 100.
Yeah.
And that, like they grew up eating butter and saturated fat. And
Also, people
steak
ate butter and saturated fat and lived till 38 at one point, but
right. But still, it's like, I just feel like when you look at our grandparents' generation, like they weren't health nuts.
No.
They were smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and eating, like.
They sure were. God bless them.
But there wasn't, the depletion in our soil wasn't there. And it's like, naturally, they had more resilience.
Yeah.
And so I think in my own lineage, like my grandma had kind of like glimmers of some chronic health issues like IBS and a lot of histamine issues. No one knew what that was back then. Horrible anxiety and like panic attacks out of nowhere, which was like also a histamine symptom for me, like panic attacks seemingly out of nowhere that were connected to no apparent trigger. And then my mom dealing with a lot of health. She had her adenoids removed. It was like her adenoids, I think she had completely removed, which is part of your immune system. It's like as if our body just gives us spare parts.
Yeah, I think especially as women, we see it in our mothers and grandmothers. We're like seeing our chronic decline.
It's very painful to see that, but it's like, it's interesting to see like how generationally my mom, that was the first generation that really grew up or like introduced to processed foods. And so then you have like our generation where I was like born in 95. So I was cereal kid. I was Captain Crunch kid, a Cocoa Krispie, brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts. I thought brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts were healthier because they were brown. Like that was my level of nutrition knowledge. I remember, and also too, what you said about you could have had Hashimoto's as young as a child. Like you could have had it when you were like 5 or 6. I remember going into like first grade and being so tired in the morning, not waking up. My mom would pour a little glass of Coca-Cola because she knew the caffeine would like get me up. And I literally would do a shot of Coca-Cola before I went off to school.
I had Pepsi in my thermos. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Listen, our parents were like, let's get this kid some caffeine stat.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like, thinking about generationally, I am so scared, honestly, and it breaks my heart for like this generation of kids right now.
Yeah.
Because I get DMs from parents and like my child's dealing with gut issues, my child's dealing with MCAS, my child's dealing with histamine issues, my child's dealing with this and that. And I just think it's like chronic illness is exploding, like absolutely exploding. I think partially like there's just a generational resilience that's being lost because we're just so out of alignment with the foods we should be eating. Our soils are like there's just so many.
But it kind of makes for a boomerang effect. Like, they've now created us like hyper obsessive at finding answers. Like, kids who are like so sick that we're like, oh, no. I'm going to figure this out at all costs. And we just become these like weird little internet super geniuses. And we're like, I'm going to disseminate this information through a viral TikTok. Let's do this thing. Like it's kind of created like I'm very grateful in many ways for how compromised I was born because I think the body compensates, it's like when you have weaknesses in certain areas, the body will kind of like supercharge others and you kind of find these skills get developed the more you try to like, the more nature or like whatever the universe tries to like hold us down. Not even the universe, the chemical companies who are poisoning us try to like hold us down. The more we kind of become like, we find a way. Nature finds a way, kind of. Yeah. So I think we'll be just fine. But I know what you mean. Where just this is the response. Yes. Us like sitting here trying to disseminate this information. People taking their health into their own hands, DIYing it. Like this is a revolution essentially because of what we've experienced the last few generations. It's really going to end with us in the next generation.
And not to sound woo-woo. Again, I feel like this is the place for like
the place. Woo it up. People have no idea how woo I really am.
Same. But I feel like my people who are alive in 2024 today, it's like our souls chose to live here during this time in human history. Yeah. And again, like I don't believe that I've suffered senselessly with digestive issues or senselessly with chronic illness. I believe I was meant to learn something from it, and my soul like chose to show up in this way because I was meant to do this work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people might think that's delusional, but I will just say, like, I can't believe that we just suffer senselessly with
Oh my God.
these issues. And I always say, like, play the hand of cards you've been dealt, like, really well.
Yeah.
Because for me, right before I came here, I'm like, I know I'm a little, I struggle with detoxification. I tend to be a little bit more puffier, like when I wake up in the morning. So I be taking a liposomal glutathione before I come over here in my little Symbiotica squeezy pouch.
Yeah.
And that is me playing the hand of cards I've been dealt really well. Or I'm very intentional about like cruciferous veggies, like my broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, like for the sulforaphane and supporting the liver. Like I'm really intentional about that because I know it helps me just feel like I feel like I have to be more intentional about that than the average person. But that's me just playing my hand of cards really well, you know?
Yes. Okay. I love that take. With the hand of cards that you were dealt.
Yeah.
With the diagnoses, especially Hashimoto's being an autoimmune disease, where so many people don't even believe or don't even know that their autoimmune disease can be put into remission. They can get their antibodies down and essentially, quote, reverse or manage that condition.
Yes.
What were the major pillars aside from nervous system regulation, which we'll talk out and flesh out,
for sure,
that moved the needle for you?
The number one thing for me was getting gluten out of my diet 100%. And I feel like too, the triggers for autoimmunity are very bio-individual. Yeah. I've met people where that doesn't make so much of a difference. And then people like myself made a huge difference. I don't have celiac. I hear a lot of people say like, you don't need to cut out gluten unless you have celiac disease. And for me, it made probably the biggest difference in my mental health, joint pain, digestion, and bringing thyroid antibodies down and bringing TSH down. And that's just my like N of one experience, but that helped me tremendously. And something I want to put out there too, because I hear from people, well, I'm not having an issue with gluten because I'm not bloated, but it can manifest in different ways.
Let's talk about that. Yes. What are the non-celiac gluten intolerance reactions that one can have, especially mental health wise?
I feel like it's so individual to the person, but I'll just share what I've seen, not only in myself, but my client population. You don't really know this. You can't really notice these things unless you've kind of removed it. I would say for a bare minimum of 3 to 6 months. So my advice to anyone is like, if you haven't done that, maybe give that a try for like a period of time and then record some of your symptoms. Like maybe mark down like, okay, you asked about symptoms you might be experiencing. For me, it was joint pain, specifically around my ankles and like behind my knees. It was very severe mental health symptoms that I just kind of had my whole life. And I didn't even realize those could improve until I got that out. Specifically like very intense depression, anxiety.
I have a friend who has been off gluten for many years. It's just like the one thing that she still can't reintroduce.
Yes.
And for many people, I think it is the one thing they do have to just stay off of, unfortunately. But she will know if she's been glutened, if she suddenly has these thoughts of impending doom.
Yes.
Like
that's
there's
me
a
too.
hopelessness that covers her mind. And she's like, oh my goodness, this is not me. And that's something that can happen with gluten.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's exactly that to a T. That's why I got tested for celiacs and I don't have celiacs because the mental health symptoms were so severe. Also, I would say like rage, like anger and rage, like when I would consume gluten and I'm like, this is not me. Like, I don't feel like myself.
And that's probably from neuroinflammation.
Yeah.
Because there's now even like lab panels. I think there's like that Cyrex assay.
Oh, wow.
Where you can see what part of the brain even is having like an autoimmune reaction to the gluten, even if it's not a celiac reaction.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because the whole body's connected. If there's intestinal permeability, it makes sense that there would be like blood-brain barrier related issues and neural inflammation, but it's like uncontrollable rage. And that's how I know I've been glutened. Like that's my tell. It's not bloating. It's not constipation. And I think those are the things that people will look out for. But what I want people to take home is that gut issues and reactions to different things can manifest in other ways other than bloating, loose stool, constipation. For some people, it can manifest as brain fog. I see that all of the time. Yeah. Really intense brain fog where mid-sentence you forget what you're saying, or mental health. We talked about joint pain. I've even worked with people with acne and like eczema and like skin related issues. And they've noticed, again, anecdotally, that some of those things have improved upon eliminating gluten. So that's like the big takeaway, is that issues with different foods can manifest in ways other than traditional digestive issues. And I think that's what people are oftentimes looking for.
I got a question for you this morning on my stories where people said, if I have Hashimoto's, do I need to cut out gluten forever?
So it's I feel like the answer to that's very bio-individual. For example, I have a friend that also, she put her Hashimoto's into remission. Mm-hmm. Homegirl's eating sourdough, like having no issues. But it's like organic, not fortified, homemade sourdough. Like she can eat that no problem.
And I'm sure she's done a lot of gut healing.
Yes. Yeah. She's been in a good place in her health. And I would love to get to a place I could re-add it in. I'll be honest, I'm not there just yet. I would say, again, it's very bio-individual and you need to test on yourself. Like your N of one anecdotal experience is the most valuable thing when it comes to that. So maybe you have a period where you eliminate it for 3 to 6 months, and then you get to a place where, okay, I'm not having symptoms. Maybe I get my labs checked. I don't have elevated thyroid antibodies anymore. They've gone down drastically, and maybe like labs look really good. Maybe that's a point for you that you could experiment and add in like because there's also so many reasons someone could be reacting to gluten. For thyroid issues, they could be reacting to the gluten protein and its molecular mimicry, where the body attacks that gluten protein, then attacks anything that remotely looks like it, aka the thyroid gland. Or there could be like different pesticides like glyphosate that people could be reacting to. It could be fortified grains and folic acid that people can't actually like utilize and properly absorb. So there's like literally a million reasons that someone could be reacting. So my advice is like, if you feel like you've gotten your health to a really good place and you're not having symptoms and your labs look good, maybe you try an organic sourdough and you see how that feels to you. And maybe you get your labs checked again in like 6 months.
Yeah.
Really, that's the only way you'll know, is kind of experimenting on yourself, because I find gluten's so bio-individual to the person.
That's very sensible advice. And I think the most important part of what you said is you have to get it out for 3 to 6 months minimum first to even have a new baseline where you can log potential symptoms and reactions and like feel how you really feel without it.
Yes.
Because I think people think that like going gluten-free is kind of like a diet where you can cheat on some days.
Yeah.
And this is the one thing. Anything else you can have wiggle room with, literally.
Yeah.
Gluten is the one thing where you have to abstain 100% because like you said, if there is an autoimmune reaction to the protein,
immune system reacting to it,
you're going to set the immune system off all over again. Any of the immune calming that you did by cutting it out is instantly going to be reactivated, and you're going to have to start the cycle all over again. So you got to cut it out completely for at least 6 months.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because at the beginning of my journey, one of the not mistakes I felt like I made, it's a big transition. Gluten's in everything. And it's also cultural. It's like how people connect with their families and stuff. It can be a really big transition to like find swaps, find good restaurants, find a gluten-free bread you like little swaps like that can be really challenging for people. But I will say that I flirted with gluten is what I called it. Like I would like do the whole gluten-free thing, and I'd like have gluten-free toast, but then I would like flirt with gluten on the weekends. Like that's what I called it. It was like, oh, I'm flirting with gluten. Yes. But that was keeping me, for me specifically, it's very individual, but for me that was continuously flaring. Like, well, why do I still have joint pain? Why do I still have acne? Why is my hair still falling out? That's another one, is like hair loss. That's also my tell for gluten. Wow. If I notice really significant hair loss. And in general, just like thyroid related symptoms. When I notice like thyroid related things are flaring for me, I'm like, I feel like the gluten snuck in. So
yes, I do really feel like hair loss also can be so related for some people to immune overactivation and like inflammation stemming from the immune system being on constant high alert and just kind of like that is a full body inflammatory response, because when the immune system sees or thinks that it sees something that it needs to attack, your inflammation everywhere is going to be higher. And of course, your scalp inflammation is going to be higher. Those follicles are affected. So hair loss is not just, oh my gosh, a biotin deficiency or even a vitamin D or iron. Those things have a role to play.
For sure.
But it's so multifactorial. And so it is very hard to even nail down. I still don't necessarily know the exact reason. I know in maybe Chinese medicine terms why my hair was falling out, but I can't tell you exactly in Western terms. It kind of got better as everything else got better.
Yeah, as a byproduct.
Yeah.
And that was my experience too, where I felt like I very much detached from the outcome. Like people will ask me, how long did it take you to grow your hair back? So there was a point I had a bald, like a literal bald spot on my head. And that is so just like, it shakes your confidence. You feel very just like self-conscious about that. And for me, it's like, I just found that it was a byproduct of healing other things, like getting to the root of gut issues, working on the thyroid related component, because hair loss is also just a very common symptom of Hashimoto's, like very common symptom. So for me, it's like as the thyroid issues got better, the hair loss just improved as a byproduct. It was like a symptom of deeper imbalances going on.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also to your point of gluten and the mental health symptoms,
Yeah.
I think it's just a good way to think of mental health symptoms as something that can be related to GI inflammation in general, whether it's gluten that's directly creating some GI inflammation or whether it is eating a good amount of processed foods. Or like you said, one Oreo is not going to kill you, but to someone who's on a really good streak and knows they have to abstain from processed foods, you eat a few Oreos one night and you very well could the next day have an inflammatory response from that and feel not like yourself and kind of start to spiral about things and feel hopeless, and your entire perspective of your life can change.
Yeah.
And you can think that something's wrong with you and that you're flawed or you're,
broken.
Yeah. And like can start to identify with this dark cloud and this depression that can come over you when it's so related to this like inflammation, this dampness, like we'd say in Chinese medicine, in your gut that's kind of like bogging down the mind and creating these heavy, heavy feelings of sadness. It can be so gut related. And that's why in today's world, again, it can be really worthy to try to eat as wonderfully whole of a diet as possible, just to keep your mental health clear.
And I also think, with the mental health, because I was diagnosed with depression. I was medicated.
Same.
I was medicated for it.
Absolutely.
And someone on my Instagram stories asked me just the other day, they're like, why are you against antidepressants? And I'm like, not against SSRIs, not against any type of medication like that. They're tools. But for me, I think that was a misdiagnosis. And for me personally, I think my depression was a symptom of deeper imbalances going on. Yeah. And it was very real and it was very valid. And mental health is so, it could not be more nuanced of a topic. But for me, it's like the thyroid, people don't realize this too, that the thyroid's deeply connected to mental health. In the beginning of Hashimoto's too, it's very normal to be extremely anxious, extremely depressed, extremely anxious, extremely depressed. Weight fluctuations where you're gaining weight, losing. I've talked to people with Hashimoto's where they're like, I have size 4 to size 12 clothes in my closet because weight is fluctuating. Mental health is fluctuating. Yes. So for me, it was a 5-minute doctor's visit and they were like, here's a clipboard of questions. And if you check 5 of the 7 boxes, you're depressed. And I'm like, okay, but we're not going to look at the thyroid. We're not going to talk about the gut. Because for me personally, yes, I had like a lot of childhood trauma, but also it's like the thyroid does play a huge role in mental health. Yes. And it would make sense because gluten is such a trigger for people with thyroid issues. Just because of that gluten protein, which sourdough still has the gluten protein for the sourdough girlies, but that it makes sense why that would trigger mental health symptoms. You know what I mean?
Well, because like you said, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is not just hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
Even though overwhelmingly it often will present as that hypo state where you'll have the sleeping a lot, sluggishness, weight gain, hair loss as an overarching picture. But because it is autoimmune in nature and because the immune system is constantly trying to fluctuate and regulate, you will have periods of hyperthyroid hormone production, hyperhormone production, as well as hypohormone production. And it comes in these waves. Yeah. And we know when you have too much thyroid hormone, it will cause anxiety. And we know that when you have too little thyroid hormone, it will depress all of the functions of the body. That's why constipation will come along because gut motility is slowed. That's why depression will come along because the mind is experiencing this inflammation / again, this like depressed function. And so everything slows down just like everything speeds up. So to your point of like checking off boxes at a psychiatrist's office, it's so tough when we're operating in a system where one part of the system wants to cut the head off from the neck, you know, and just wants to see the head and not the rest of the body that it's attached to. And that's where Western medicine shines, right? Like when depression is present, when you're having severe acute depression, and you can check off 5 to 7 of those boxes, some people absolutely need an SSRI so that they don't commit suicide. I mean, this is like
it's
serious stuff.
Life-saving for a lot of people.
But long-term, as you're perhaps receiving that treatment, which could be a really good fit for you at this chapter, let's really dig into the underlying factors that could be throwing you for a loop and causing this mental state that you're experiencing, because it doesn't have to be like that forever. And you could have other tools in your toolbox aside from SSRIs that might help you.
And no psychiatrist was like, hey, are you pooping twice a day? Are you pooping once? Are you having a bowel movement?
Yeah.
Let's check your thyroid. Let's check what is your diet like. That was never a conversation that was had. And we have really good research on like omega-3 and anxiety, omega-3 and depression and B vitamins and how that is so important for mental health and like making neurotransmitters. Like we have so much information now. And that's not to say like mental health is purely physical, because again, it's very multifaceted, very nuanced. Could not be more nuanced of a conversation, but still, it's like, we don't even talk about that. Let's not even a conversation.
Feels kind of dirty to talk about because you don't, it's like you don't want to question people's lived experience. So you don't want to like sow doubt. You never want someone to feel like it's their fault. Like, oh, you just didn't take enough omegas and Bs. Sorry that you're depressed, sister. But there's a time and a place to have the conversation and just let people know like, hey, there's other things to look at. And we have the data. We have data showing how this improves scores of major depressive disorder, yada, yada. So it's always worth it to look at your nutrition. And that's why I know you're so passionate about nutrition specifically, because you can make such an impact by adding nutrients to your plate and also perhaps removing things that are just spiraling that cycle of inflammation. So aside from cutting out gluten, I know I asked you kind of like for the major pillars of what helped your Hashimoto's. And I just I'm curious because I think all of us now like to follow people like you, health communicators / like influencers, right? Who, where we share, hey, I had this thing and I got to the other side of it. There's a reason why that's so alluring, because we're not getting those kinds of answers or results from practitioners. So we want to know how you did it.
I would say like another big piece was really, and I know this sounds really boring, but focusing on nutrient density in the diet, because I've had people come to work with me and they've said, Fiona, I've never seen food in this way, of just seeing food as like macros or seeing food as calories. And that's not to say macros and calories don't matter. But focusing on nutrient density. And what I mean by that is, what foods are the most nutrient dense? We've got oysters, sardines, liver. Like I make beef kidney ice cubes. And my boyfriend's like, what is this in the freezer? He's like, what is in this ice cube container? And I'll get kidney from like a local farmer's market, chuck it in a food processor, pour it in an ice cube mold. And then every time I cook ground beef, I'll like pop that into ground beef.
That's so genius.
Yeah. Or you can even buy like ancestral blends of ground beef that have that already in there. But I do things like that to get extra nutrition in, because when you look at our food system and our food, just food in general, very nutritionally depleted. So we have to be so intentional. You're not going to get in all of your magnesium by accident. You're not going to get in enough potassium by accident. Unfortunately, in 2024, if you're kind of just like, even just eating generally healthy, you have to be very intentional to get your minerals in. So for me, focusing on nutrient dense foods, and what I'll give like a really specific example of what I mean by that. Like I try to do a really high quality, like grass fed red meat, like a couple times a week. I will try to incorporate organ meats, like every, maybe like 1 or 2 times a week in my little kidney cubes, or you can supplement with that too. I ate sardines before I came over here. That was my weird airplane snack of like, I'm packing my tinned sardines and oysters and things like that. So I focus majorly on nutrient density. And there was even a point when I was focusing so much on like gluten-free eating that it was kind of like missing the forest for the trees a little bit of like, well, I'm eating gluten-free, but I was eating a lot of processed gluten-free food, which is also kind of like void of nutrition. So focusing on like root vegetables, potatoes, squash for potassium, like berries for antioxidants, just really nutrient dense diet has helped me a lot. Cause I think it's like, again, you're not going to hit even your micronutrients. We talk so much about protein and fiber, but you're not going to hit your micros, which are so important. Cause when you think of thyroid, like we need different micronutrients for our thyroid to function. We need magnesium, we need selenium, we need iodine. And so again, like those micronutrients are super, super important, and getting as much through diet as possible, like food first, supplement second, is my approach.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think this is one of the most important conversations because we're hearing more and more.
Yeah.
Like there's like mineral influencers now, you know, it's like
Yeah.
the girlies who are doing our hair tissue mineral analysis and who are saying you got to balance your minerals, and minerals are what stop you from absorbing heavy metals. And I had an amazing sports dietitian on my show this season who talked about how important minerals are for thyroid, but that's a blanket term.
Yes.
And I think it confuses people sometimes more than it helps them. What minerals are you talking about? What foods are they in? How do I know I'm getting too much or not enough?
Yeah.
So maybe you could start walking us through what are the top 5 minerals crucial for thyroid function?
So before we even get into thyroid, I think it's important to specify the difference between macrominerals and microminerals. So your minerals are sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. So if you're low in those, the trace minerals, which are like selenium, you hear a lot about for thyroid, and like iodine, like those are more so your trace minerals, which just means we need like those in smaller quantities. But your sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, those are the most important things. So especially if there are dairy-free girlies listening to this, you can get your calcium. You can get your calcium from other places, but you got to be really intentional. If you are not consuming dairy, I'm not dogmatic and saying, oh, like you can't be healthy. The only way you can be healthy is if you consume dairy, because that's simply not true. But if you're not consuming dairy, if you're cutting things out, you are also cutting out minerals. So like if you cut out, and vitamins. So if you cut out, for example, eggs, like a lot of people will have, like for some people with Hashimoto's and autoimmune, that flares them. So I understand why people eliminate that, but you're also eliminating retinol and vitamin A and choline and a lot of, like, it's a very nutrient dense food that you're eliminating. So that's where I want people to start, is like, I think almost everyone, unless your doctor has instructed you otherwise, almost everyone can benefit from like a good quality magnesium supplement, like 350 to 400 milligrams is what I do. I personally do a magnesium supplement, and then I do like a magnesium lotion. I double up because that's another thing with minerals, is when we're in fight or flight, when we're stressed, we burn through those minerals a lot faster than if we were not stressed, not in fight or flight. And so that's why we're kind of like burning up. So you could be eating very clean and nutrient dense and gluten-free and dairy-free and all of the things, but we also burn through those minerals. So magnesium is one of those things. I see magnesium as just like a non-negotiable for supplementing. And then I actually really like using, and not everyone's cup of tea, not everyone's like favorite tool. But for me, I found it really helpful to just use an app like Chronometer and track for just a couple days, like do an inventory. I like to do an inventory of nutrition like quarterly and just track and see where I'm at. And that will show you, are you just hitting the RDA of calcium? Are you hitting the RDA?
So let's talk about Chronometer for a second for those who are not familiar.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have tracked, I know a lot of people on their phone right now have a little MyFitnessPal app, and it's like, you haven't tracked your lunch for today. That notification kills me. But I've used MyFitnessPal to track my macros.
Yes.
Because when I was on my insulin resistance journey, I was like, your girl needs to make sure she's eating enough protein.
Yeah.
But there are other apps like Chronometer that will actually, as you're inputting your food, sure, it's tracking your macros, but it's giving you an insane, almost like
your micros,
lab-like view of all of these different macros with all of these different scales. And it's crazy when you plug a day's worth of food in and you see how many minerals and nutrients you're not hitting.
Yes. And Chronometer too, for people who haven't used it, it's set to the RDA, which is the bare minimum. Like that's the bare minimum to prevent disease. So imagine if you're deficient in something, it's going to take more. You're going to have to surpass the RDA for some. So it's like, I think it can be helpful to use a tool like that. because it's free, and you can maybe do a quarterly check-in and just see like, okay, I'm going to track for a week and I'm just going to see, and it will show you an average too. So you can do a 7-day average, a month average of like all of your minerals, and you can see, okay, like consistently on a daily basis, I'm only getting 20% of the RDA of calcium. Well, that's a macro mineral. That's going to, again, that's important for our, even like REM sleep. I didn't understand why I wasn't sleeping well. My Oura ring would always say like, you're getting 20 minutes of REM. I couldn't figure out why. Calcium is really important for sleep, like in our bones.
It was from calcium deficiency.
Yeah.
That
And
you
when I
weren't
added
sleeping?
in dairy, my REM improved. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Yeah.
I do feel better in many markers with dairy, but I know I have like a threshold, especially when I'm stressed.
And it's very bio-individual. Like there's some people that I find like cannot add it in. And then there's other people where it's like maybe different types of dairy. Like someone DM'd me just the other day and they're like, I want to maybe dabble with reintroducing dairy. Where should I start? And I'm like, start with low lactose options. Like maybe
also goat milk has a ton of calcium.
Yeah.
A ton, like way
and
more
that
calcium.
tends to be better tolerated by a lot of people. Like I started with like a goat's cheese, sheep's cheese, goat milk, like you said. For some people, they tolerate that better. So you do have to kind of like experiment and play with things to figure out what your body tolerates. And even you said like you have a threshold for it. I feel like I'm at a point now with my gut health. I used to be so severely lactose intolerant, and now I'm at a place I can add it in. So it's very much like every chapter of your journey is a little bit different, and what you're able to do looks a little different. And so that's where, again, using an app like Chronometer and just seeing, okay, consistently on a day-to-day basis, I'm getting like 30% of my consumption of folate. And that's really important for mental health. That's really important for hormones. It's a really important vitamin. So it's helpful to kind of see that. And that's like a free tool that people can use just to make sure they're hitting all of their markers and all of their bases. So I like to offer that to people.
Sometimes you can't make a change until you know where you're going wrong.
Yes.
It's the same way where like it takes sometimes seeing the data of your nutritional intake in a hardcore way for you to be like, oh my God, there's a problem here. And sometimes once you see, you know, and then you can act. But I think that that's kind of what's missing. We're in an age of information overload. This is not the first podcast where we've talked about minerals or calcium. But I think people are like, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. Or like, yeah, could calcium really be that important? Or I have a million other things to worry about. But when it's something that you cannot ignore, when you really understand the why, the fact that it's connected to sleep, the fact that like every single day you're missing 70% of what you should be eating, and you're giving yourself a far less advantage to handle life by being undernourished. That's when you're like, okay, I have to make a change. I have to start building my plate for nourishment, and how many things can I add in to just sprinkle a little something in there.
And I think too, because I'm a why person, it's like, don't just tell me to eat vegetables. Tell me why. Tell me why. Like, don't just tell me I need like a lot of colors on my plate. Tell me why I need a lot of colors on my plate. So for me, it's like I learned about folate and methylation and how that plays a role in mental health. And that really motivated me. I'm like, I'm going to work on my leafy greens. And to this day, I notice if I make a giant, like I'll pack an omelet with like tons of like collard greens or leafy greens. Like I'll pack that sucker with dark leafy greens. And I notice the days I do that, my mental health is a lot better. And it's like never in my life had I made that correlation or connection. Potassium is really important for insulin sensitivity, healthy thyroid function. That's a macro mineral. Almost everyone's depleted in potassium. And stress burns up your potassium. So if you have any type of like blood sugar issues, irregular periods, painful periods, hair loss, always cold, like the thyroid symptoms, the PCOS symptoms, it's like you got to get your potassium in. And so I think that's helpful to connect that to your symptoms and like understanding like how that can impact you in a positive way, because that's what I needed for it to click.
Yes.
And I think people need it to connect to their life experience and their symptoms to like actually start applying that.
Yep. It's so funny. Like I spent many years blogging.
Yeah.
And I would write these posts, right, about like sweet potato, like why sweet potato is the underrated superfood.
Yeah.
And I would utilize traditional Chinese medicine and the way that they spoke about the energetics of food and the organs that food would touch and how it would nourish and treat this deficiency and this symptom and this lived experience to almost like market food and get people excited about food. Like I got almost really good at making clickbait titles about different
to get people excited
foods.
about it.
And I think that was so much of my job for like the first like 5, 6, 7 years that I was on the internet, like I just saw myself as like the healthy food advertiser or the person where I was like, ooh, I could get people to click on this and care by kind of like selling what it's going to do for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the truth. And that's why I hate when people, like Western conventional academia, like shits on traditional medicine and like Chinese medicine and like, well, there's not enough science and data. And like, what do you mean a kidney meridian? What do you mean a spleen? Your spleen doesn't do that. I'm like, these incredible humans that developed this system of talking about nutrition and the human body and our patterns of symptoms put language to things in a way that like gives color to the why, like you said, why a sweet potato could actually help your reproductive function. Now, we know that that sweet potatoes have potassium. We get that now. But they knew this thousands of years ago that it helps nourish your kidney yin and your fertility. Right? Like, and helps with like fatigue when you have lack of essence and lack of fluids and you don't have a high libido and all these things, because it has these nutrients, right? That like build you up and build up that part of the body. And now we know, it's good for hormone and thyroid health and you need that for fertility and sex drive. It's just amazing. It's amazing what these traditional systems, like the relationship and the passion that they had for like understanding every single food. And I think the more that we can like dive into it and get really woo about that and even look at like the spiritual benefits of certain foods, that helps people so much more than it harms them. Even if they're not all true and perfectly scientifically backed, it helps people. Let's talk about that food in like a fun, spiritual, weird way.
And you're so good at that. Because on your stories, I'm like, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. I'm like, I see Olivia drinking cranberry juice. I'm going to start drinking cranberry juice. Like, you're very good at getting people excited about that, because I get very excited about.
Well, because I get excited about the why. And I think that's how most people function.
Same.
And again, when a doctor is sitting with you and
there's no
saying,
why.
Do this, do that, or like, just take this.
Eat
take
less,
that.
move more.
There is no why. And it's taking the autonomy and the respect for the individual and respecting and trusting that that individual will be able to understand that why and can hold it and can like, be the steward of that why. It's like we're not idiots. We know how to understand things and like have a huge capacity to learn and learn the language of the body and even learn language of science. So explain the why. And traditional medicine cares enough to explain the why. So no wonder people are going to that in lieu of Western, even though again, we love Western when you need it. But it's like, let's have more of an appreciation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's like, not to go on a tangent, but I also feel like there's this attack on the feminine, because traditional Chinese medicine and these ancient modalities of healing were very intuitive.
Yeah.
It was all intuition. It was all like straight channeling, like straight intuition. And now it's like our society's and we live in an evidence-based society, which like we need evidence for certain things. Like that's very needed. It
brings order. Love that.
It's very needed for our society. But also it's like, I like to say that science proves what intuition always is known.
Yeah.
In a way.
Absolutely.
And I think there's this attack, because I feel like too you asked me like what's helped me most on my journey. I've used my intuition to guide me a lot. That's maybe very Scorpio, Sun, Moon, Mercury of me, but I've used my intuition a lot. I can't tell you how many times I opened up a journal and I've written out, what am I missing? Like, what am I missing in my health? And just automatic journaling and like letting a pen flow. I'm like, oh, well, I journaled about beets today. Like maybe I should pickle some beets and like make some beets. Or like, oh, that's interesting. Like I'm journaling about castor oil packs. Like let's add in a castor oil pack. Like I've used intuition a lot on my journey. So I feel like too with social media, people are so quick to go to social media and go, well, this person's doing this and this person's doing that. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to a podcast and I get full body chills listening to people. I'm like, yeah, that's what I should be doing. And then other times I'm like, yeah, that just doesn't resonate.
Yes.
And that's powerful. That's your internal guiding system. So I really like automatic journaling of like, hey, what am I missing in my health right now? Like, what are some answers? And like literally just let your pen write and see what comes up for you.
What a helpful, lovely, tangible tip. I've never had anyone say that on the show before. And I really love it. Well, because it's bridging that gap. Like I said, let's trust people.
Yeah.
Let's trust people with the why. Let's trust people to bring their intuition to us as practitioners. Or imagine a doctor ask someone, what do you intuitively feel like you need? Like that could change the forever paradigm of medicine. Because most times, you've said this to me on our call yesterday, most times we know what we need to do.
Yeah.
Somewhere deep within, we know what we need.
Yeah.
We just either resist it or think, oh, that can't really be it, or I'm going to wait for this authority figure to tell me what I actually need to do. And it does tie into what you said about our society and kind of like the wounding of the feminine. Like, we're like, for a long time now, I mean, you look back to the witches' trials, like we kind of had to be woo-woo in secret. And we live in a very right-brained, you know, academic, evidence, reality, science, math rewarding society. Right. And it has brought us order because we used to not have any of that. And we treated dysentery with mercury, whatever. Yeah. Like, probably not the best.
We need the right brain sometimes.
That was probably it was probably a man's intuition that said that, actually. But yeah, the pendulum has swung, and now we need to bring it back to the middle because there is so much merit. Let's get our intuition involved. Let's trust the person and let that be in the room. We're going to heal a lot faster.
And oftentimes people know what's going on. And it's like, if you listen to someone long enough, they'll tell you what's going on, you know? Like, even for me, I don't know if I've ever told this story, but back in like 2016, I was really into like paleo podcasts and like really into, because I feel like 2016 was the era of wellness that was like paleo, Whole30. And so I was I was like trying to look for answers. And that's why I'm so passionate about being here and speaking on podcasts like this, because this is how I found a lot of answers for my health when I couldn't afford in college, when I was waiting tables and I was working full time and I was in school. It's like I couldn't afford a $10,000 functional medicine doctor. I was listening to podcasts. I was just trying to DIY it. I like to say I treated my health like a DIY project, and it's probably why it's taken me a bit longer to get here. But it's like, I think too, I was listening to a podcast where it was Dr. Jolene Brighton, and she was talking about her experience because she has PCOS and Hashimoto's. And she was talking about like post-birth control syndrome and like her own symptoms of like PCOS and Hashimoto's. I'm like, that's it. Like, that's it. I know that's what's going on. Yep. And my intuition, like full body chills listening to that podcast. I'm like, I know that's what's going on. Got my labs checked, and that's what was going on. You know what I mean? And it's like, I just think that your intuition, like I've never been surprised by a lab test. Like anytime I've done like a stool test or like blood testing, I'm like, that's not surprising at all. Cause I feel like I know based on symptoms, what's going on in my body.
What are some other ways we can actively and tangibly leverage and explore that intuition? Kind of like that automatic writing.
I like to give clients like symptoms to look for. And like, I think like journaling, different symptoms can be really helpful. I encourage people though, because I feel like when you're dealing with a lot of like overwhelming health symptoms, it's like, I've got the hair loss and I've got the acne and I've got this and I've got that. It can feel like so much. So I would write on I had a wall calendar in my bathroom, and I would write down like one symptom that day, like one bad symptom and like one thing that was improving to get my brain focusing on like the good too. Cause I feel like when you've dealt with so many health issues for so long, the brain is so focused on like fixing what's wrong, and you don't even notice the things that were improving. I didn't even notice my mental health had done a 180 when I was getting off gluten until I'm like, wait a second. Like I had a reflection. I'm like, wait a second, my mental health has done a 180. So when you're journaling like that, I encourage people to have like a symptom journal, only one bad symptom that day. Even if there was 100, just write down one, and then write down one thing that you feel like has improved. Even if that's like, I didn't have a migraine today, like just write that down. Like it can be something really small. And I think knowing what symptoms to look for can help build intuition. Like for me, I feel like I had a lot of like histamine related symptoms. So like watery eyes, puffiness, swelling, water retention. And for me, that is my, like, I felt very, very puffy when I was dealing with digestive issues. And so the connection between like the histamine symptoms and the digestive issues, like knowing specific symptoms to look for and just developing a relationship with your body. And that's where too, it's like sometimes eliminating things and then reintroducing them can help you build that intuition as well. Because like I said, like the only way I knew how gluten was impacting my mental health was like when I have if it sneaks in somehow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think this is where I want to start talking with you about how you actually work with clients now.
Yeah.
Because what you're talking about with this symptom journaling reminds me of the food journaling that you have your clients do. And I do believe because, a doctor, a functional practitioner, anyone that you are hiring and enlisting to be your partner in your health journey can only be your health partner, and they can only see you sort of as deeply as you can see yourself sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't have, the more information you give them, the better, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a record, a journal of your cycles, like your cyclical symptoms and how things evolve over a month and symptom, like pattern recognition.
Yes.
Then they don't really have anything to go off of. So talk to us about how someone can develop pattern recognition and how food journaling plays a role.
Yeah. So in terms of, I'll start with this, because what you said about a cyclical nature to your symptoms. I also think in terms of symptom journaling, like I mentioned, one negative thing, one positive thing, notice how things change at different points in your menstrual cycle.
Yep.
Because I didn't realize, it is interesting, and get curious about it. It is interesting that I'm only constipated the week leading up to my period. Okay, that's a pattern. Maybe I need to up my fiber a little bit during the luteal stage. For me, I have to add in a psyllium husk supplement, the luteal stage of my cycle, and that helps me so. Same. It tastes like sawdust,
garbage. Yeah,
sawdust supplement, but it helps. So I'll add that in the luteal stage. Or it is interesting that I do notice my anxiety is a lot worse the week leading up to my period. Or it's actually really interesting that I notice I had candida. So I noticed my candida symptoms would be worse the second half of my cycle. I'd have more of a white thrush on my tongue, or I would have more intense sugar cravings. And it's that makes sense because we're more insulin resistant during the second half of our cycle. So you can start to notice a cyclical pattern too, because if it's again, that awareness you have with yourself will help you on your healing journey. In terms of food and mood journaling, that is a tool that I use with clients, where I'll have clients fill out 7 days of eating. And so basically I want to know, what are you eating on a day-to-day basis, and just taking an inventory. And you can do this at home, even if you're not working with a practitioner, of I'm just going to get an inventory. I just want to see if there's any patterns that I can recognize, in my diet and how I feel in my digestion. And so basically, you're documenting breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. How do you feel after eating? Where are you at in your menstrual cycle? Do you notice you're craving different things? Do you notice you're reaching for different things because you're dopamine seeking? Do you see that you're reaching for things as a comfort? Get curious about it instead of judgmental. I'm not here to judge anyone. Back in college, I was eating, before I went gluten-free, I was eating Taco Bell 4 or 5 days a week. I'm not here to judge anyone based on their food journal. So it's if you ate hot Cheetos, write down that you ate hot Cheetos. Don't judge yourself for it, but get curious. Get curious.
Find the why.
Yeah, get curious about it is interesting. I do notice during the luteal stage of my cycle, or the 2 weeks leading up to my period, I do notice that I'm a sugar fiend and I want to eat everything in the cabinets. That's really interesting. Maybe I need to up my protein during my luteal stage to keep my blood sugar a little bit more stable. Maybe I need to up my fiber a little bit, the week before my period. And so you can start to identify patterns, not only based on where you're at in your menstrual cycle, but documenting your digestion, documenting your mental health, documenting your mood, and just do that for 7 days and get curious and look to see, did anything surprise you when you filled out that journal? Did you notice any patterns? And that's a tool I like to use with clients, because then I like to shine a light on here are and just getting curious about different patterns that might pop up in that journaling.
Yeah. And I think once you've identified a pattern, that's when you can take the right steps to address it.
Yes.
Because if you don't know the why of that pattern, I'll give an odd example. Nick and I had randomly moved to Costa Rica for 2 months, once upon a time. We were young and in love, and
Oh my gosh.
we were it was fun, but it was way too out of our comfort zones. We thought that we were it was also the era where everyone was moving to
when was this?
This was 2016, 2017. This is when all the YouTube vloggers would move to Australia and eat jackfruit all day.
Yeah.
So we were just we're going to be nomadic. We're going to be digitally working from another place. And we just thought, okay, this is probably our only chance to do this. We don't have a lease right now. Let's just see what happens if we kind of live off the grid in nature. And I'm really glad we had the experience. But when we got there and I was oh, we're alone and don't have a social network here and are just kind of living up in the scary mountain, with
who are you? What?
I have no idea. But I realized all of a sudden I was craving milk. Okay. Like I couldn't stop getting and I was like dairy free at the time. And the whole rest of my diet was dairy free. But in the morning, I would get this like milky mocha coffee that was essentially like chocolate milk. And like I needed my milky. Okay. Like, and I'm like, why? What is the pattern here? Why did this certain craving all of a sudden come up? Makes so much sense. It's like, milk as a child breastfeeding, it's like comfort. It's the ultimate comfort. So I'm like, oh, I'm just so out of my comfort zone that of course I'm craving this like very specific, very odd, like comfort kind of food. Mm-hmm. And I think that I've now kind of been able to use that framework and that like, oh, why this? To ask myself questions in other ways. I often, when I'm like totally socially exhausted at the end of the day, or when I'm just really tired and like kind of just need to sleep, I'll crave like sugar really heavy. Or like when I'm angry sometimes or I have a lot of tension, I'll crave like pretzels because they're really crunchy and my jaw almost like needs to crunch. Yeah. So I've noticed certain patterns with food cravings, and it's not that I'm like, ooh, that can help me not eat that food.
Exactly. It's just that it's pattern recognition, just being an observer.
It's just, ooh, I'm wanting to crunch or like, chew on something really bad. Maybe I'm a little bit angry right now. Could I like journal about that anger? Could I use that as a way in to just have a relationship with myself around that thing that's coming up so that I'm not totally bypassing myself all the time? Yeah. So it's just patterns are really valuable. And like the more patterns, again, that you can give your practitioner, the better they can help you because they can see the patterns and the framework of what they're educated in.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you said was it gives people a tangible example of kind of like what to look for when they're doing their own pattern recognition. Because for me, going back to like, I was not perfect at the beginning of this health journey. I remember a point before I started doing this work, before I went back to school, I worked corporate. And I remember getting off work, I was so just burnt out. I was working like 70 hours a week. I was commuting an hour there, an hour back. And it was just out of alignment for me. Like it was just not the work that I was meant to do. And I would seek food as like a way of comforting, like a way of like, I would get off work and I'm like, oh, what I have to look forward to. This is what I have to look forward to is getting Taco Bell, or like what I have to look forward to is like getting a peppermint mocha from Starbucks on my lunch break. Like food was my only source of joy, only. Like I didn't have other outlets and I was so out of alignment where I was doing work that wasn't fulfilling. I didn't have things in my life, other things other than food that brought me joy. So I was seeking that for comfort. And I think just, again, not judging yourself, like just being an observer of like, oh, and getting curious, like, oh, that is interesting that I'm feeling this way and I'm reaching for this, or I'm feeling this way and I'm reaching for that, Yeah,
absolutely. So aside from food journaling, which is that one of the first things that you do with the client? Okay.
Yep.
Walk us through, well, first off, I want you to talk about why you became a practitioner and how a lot of your clients like actually come from failed functional medicine and not Western medicine, and what you have done to change how you work with them to remedy that.
So I became a practitioner because honestly, I think I mentioned I kind of DIY'd my health across my journey.
A lot of us have.
Yeah. Out of necessity. Like there was a point I, again, couldn't afford, like back in college, my health really hit a rock bottom and I was sleeping 13 hours a night and like my friends are going out and I'm exhausted. I didn't have the resources to hire someone for help. So I started just taking matters into my own hands, listening to podcasts like this, reading books, like trying to absorb any information I could get my hands on to improve my digestive health, mental health, inflammation, like all the symptoms I was experiencing. So I'm also, this is something I'm working through in therapy, hyper independence. Like I went to school and I'm like, I'm going to figure all of this out on my own. I'm going to figure all of this out on my own. And I did figure a lot of things out on my own, but it took me a really long time. And there was a point after college I could have hired someone. I actually did recently hire one of my practitioner friends to kind of just be an outside, unbiased perspective and kind of look at things. And she gave me some really valuable, amazing tips. But it took me probably 8-9 years to get to this place in my health. And it could have taken maybe a year if I had the right support, maybe a year to 2 years for how complex and long lasting my health issues were. Yeah. Because the analogy I like to use is like, not to say to no fault of my own, like when I was a child, I couldn't help the fact that I was put on antibiotics for sinus infections and ear infections. I didn't know any, but no one was telling me the side effects of hormonal birth control when I went on it. Like I was doing the best I could with the information I had at the time, but my hole was deep. Like I was digging a hole, like the antibiotics were digging my hole a little bit, and then going on birth control was digging my hole a little bit. Speaking of minerals, because birth control does deplete different vitamins and minerals, and medications can deplete different vitamins and minerals. So I'm digging my hole a little bit, and the hole's just getting, and grew up in like 90s kid diet of like Pop-Tarts and cereal and like digging the hole. So it's going to take time to like crawl out of that hole. You know what I mean? Think about how deep the hole is. My hole's been dug for like 20 plus years. It's going to take time to dig out of that. But I think if I would have hired a practitioner, I could have cut down like an 8-9 year journey to like 1 or 2 years.
Because it's a lot of trial and error.
It's
like
so much trial and error.
That's literally why I wanted to start a supplement line, because I had the supplement graveyard that I have and have had and amassed throughout my life. I would try so many things and be like, oh, this is not quite it. Or I would be on like 7 different things that I finally found that I needed. And I'm like, if someone could just put these things together in one simple formula and like take all the guesswork out of it, that would be great. And that's why I'm still very passionate about that side of my business, because who has $10,000 for a functional doctor? You know, like obviously
very
now,
few people.
That's the thing.
In this economy.
Especially in this economy. You just, obviously other functional practitioners are not that expensive, but like the ultimate final boss functional doctors, it's so insanely expensive. So I just want to be that person who's offering like those solutions that are targeted towards the root causes that a functional doctor would help you suss out. Like I want to make sure that those are in place so that when you know your root cause is insulin resistance, you can take glucobitters. When you know your root cause is mineral deficiencies and stress affecting your HPA axis, you can take ThyroPro to help your thyroid function. So it's kind of like giving people that tool for those who are DIYing it or on their own investigative health journey. But obviously it does work so much better when you can even vet my stuff alongside a practitioner of what would be best for you right now.
And you went through all the trial and error and all the DIYing and trying. I also have a supplement graveyard. I've gotten rid of most of my supplement graveyard.
I got to clean mine out.
Yeah, you got to do a household cleaning, a spring cleaning of the supplement graveyard. But it's like you went through all of that, I think, for a reason. So then you can show people not a shortcut, but like a faster route to their health destination instead of suffering for 10 years and trial and error. And to a certain point, you do have to experiment on your body. You do have to see what works for you, because what works for other people may not be the thing that works for you. So there is trial and error. But when you're working with someone that can cut, again, a 10-year long, windy road journey to like, here's the direct path of like A to Z. And so I just want to be the person that I needed like 4 or 5 years ago. And that's a huge reason why I became a practitioner. So I can just cut down people's journeys a lot faster. And it's not to say it's like not a fast journey. Like I don't advertise like, oh yeah, you're just going to heal everything in a month. Like I don't put that out there, and I don't really believe in like, okay, 30-day hormone gut reset to like heal your hormones in 30 days. I just don't believe in that anymore, because it's like, it's a long journey. And that's not to say it's going to take you 9 years like it took me, but I just want to be like a quicker, like less pit stops, less like roadblocks to hit. And so when you're working with someone, that can be beneficial.
And what do you think is the problem that we're now seeing in functional medicine, where it's kind of like another version of Western medicine with expensive testing and one size fits all protocols?
I call it pill for every ill, but make it natural.
Literally.
Pill for every ill, but make it natural. And people, I think nowadays more than ever, people are waking up and people want like more holistic options. And so we hire someone, and this is not to drag any other practitioners at all. I have tremendous amounts of respect for other functional doctors and naturopaths, but I do more times than not have people coming to me and they're told, well, Fiona, my cortisol was high. And I was told there's nothing else I could do than take like these 17 supplements. Okay, but did they talk to you about why your cortisol is high? Because your body didn't just wake up one day and choose violence. Your body didn't just wake up one day and say, oh, you know what? We're just going to make too much cortisol. I mean, technically there could be like a genetic piece to that for some individuals. But for most people, it's like, When was the last time you saw a sunrise, a sunset? Like, when was the last time you put your phone down an hour before bed and threw on a pair of blue light blocking glasses? Are you doing one thing every day, even if it's for 5 minutes, to regulate your nervous system? When I worked corporate, I would eat my lunch in my car and I would do like a few deep breaths before I ate my lunch so I'd better digest my food. Like I'd set a timer for like 2 minutes and do some deep breaths. And that's what I had the capacity for. And that was tremendously beneficial. That's so small, but that helped me digest food better because our digestion works best when we're in a rest and digest state. Mm-hmm. So I just think what I see a lot now, I would say 50% of the clients that come to me come from either failed Western medicine or failed functional medicine, and people feel very hopeless because it's like, I'm this much money in the hole. I've worked with this practitioner and that practitioner, and I've spent, like, people go into debt. People go into medical debt working with people. And it's like you start to feel broken and hopeless, and it crushes you when it's like, that didn't get me anywhere. That didn't even move the needle forward 2%. It's like, if you're investing that much, we want to move the needle forward 90%, 80%, like as much as we can. And so I just see a lot of like, I call it green allopathy. You see a lot of green allopathy where it's pill for every ill, but make it natural. And I have clients coming to me where they're on 40 different supplements and they're paying $1,000+ a month. And we're not getting curious as to asking why until you can no longer ask why, is what I always say. It's like, why is your cortisol high? Why are you deficient in vitamin D? Why are you deficient in B vitamins? Like, I just find there's a lack of curiosity oftentimes of like, we just accept that, oh, this is low, or this blood marker looks like this, or this marker looks like that, but not asking why. Like, ask why until you can no longer ask why.
What was the thing that you told me yesterday about how people go to so many functional doctors and spend so much money, and because they're not given the right care, which is the relationship,
yes,
the curiosity, the asking why, the sitting down with someone and helping them understand the basics so that they can truly heal and be seen, because they're just kind of put through like the Western or the functional like supplement and test ringer, they start to think that they're broken.
And that's a very valid way to feel. Like, how could you not feel that way when maybe you've been on this journey for like 6, 7, 8, 10 years, maybe even longer. Like, how could you not feel that way if you haven't found answers through Western medicine and you haven't found answers through the more like holistic modalities, whether that's working with a functional doctor, naturopathic doctor, whatever. But I think oftentimes, again, it's like that why piece is lacking. For example, like, again, going back to the cortisol example, I had a client very recently that came to me and she's like, my cortisol's high. And all I was told was to just take ashwagandha or like to take adaptogens. And I love an adaptogen. Listen, I love an adaptogen. I'm an adrenal fatigue girly. I love my adaptogens. But it's disempowering to say to someone, the only thing you can do is take a pharmacy of supplements. That is not empowering people.
Because people are taught how to prescribe either supplements or medicines. Yes. They're not taught how to sit with someone and see them and be so fascinated by their story and the intricacies of their day that they can learn to witness and see, that what you just said about, the stress in this work relationship, what you just said about that thing that happened to you as a kid. So now every night, you feel this way. That could be why your cortisol is high.
And I think oftentimes too, one of the reasons that the more holistic modalities oftentimes leave people with more questions than answers, and they don't feel like it moved the needle forward. I see it time and time again, a lot of foundational work is being bypassed. I want people to think of it like a video game. And this is how I see really expensive testing, for example, that's not covered by insurance. I see that like level 61 of the video game. But you got to go through level 1 to level 60 to get to level 61. So and I'll just speak from my experience, when I was on my journey, I didn't work with a functional or natural. And again, I think we need all of the voices in holistic health. We need all of the people. But I do see, again, this green allopathy that's happening more often than not. And so for me, it's like I worked on my sleep. I worked on getting morning sunlight. I worked on seeing the sunset if I could. Sometimes my work schedule didn't always allow that. But can I get outside? Can I even eat my lunch outside? And I'm saying that as someone who lived in northeastern Ohio where it's cold. Like, I would go on my cold girl walks. And then people say, but Fiona, it's cold. But Fiona, it's raining. Listen, it was 10 degrees sometimes. And I'd bundle up and I'd put on my coat and my scarf and my gloves. And it'd be raining. Even today, being in New York, I went on my cold girl walk today to get a coffee, and the rain was slapping against my face. And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing this for my circadian rhythms, like even if it is for 5 minutes. So working on those foundations of like my sleep hygiene. Am I on screens before I go to bed? How am I sleeping? One thing a day, even if it's for 5 minutes, just to regulate your nervous system for stress. Maybe that's a 5-minute meditation in your car. Maybe that's like inhaling for 4, holding the breath for 4, exhaling for 4, like box breathing. Maybe you do that in your car. Like I would do that at red lights when I was really, really busy. I would just find little pockets of my day to add that in. And so I find we bypass a lot of these very boring, like, this is not exciting. I try to make it exciting. I try to do what you do and get people really excited about, like, let's get excited about chewing our food. Let's get excited about chewing our food 30 times per bite, and like cultivating a presence practice with your food. And I'm not perfect at this. I try my best. But asking yourself, like, what are 5 colors I can see on my plate? Like, what are 5 textures I can feel in my mouth? What are 5 tastes I can taste? Like, that sounds so boring. And it's not, you're not going to find that in a bottle on a shelf at a store. But I find like those boring foundational pieces that most people know are healthy, but maybe we don't have the why behind it, or we're not like being presented the information in an exciting and engaging way. Like level 1 to level 60, the video game gets bypassed. We jump to level 61, which is like parasite cleansing, SIBO protocols, Candida protocols, GI map testing, infrared sauna, ozone. And I'm not saying there's a time and a place for that. Those are very incredible, helpful tools, but let's not bypass level 1 to level 60, because how did you get there in your health? We act like these things are random occurrences that happened out of nowhere, but even like how we talked about, this is generational. There's 4 generations of microbiome that's been passed down to you, 4 generations of toxins that are in your bones. Mm-hmm. So it's like, these things don't just happen. And that's where I get frustrated by the lack of curiosity. Also in Western medicine, where we act like, oh, this is just genetic. This just happens. And there are things that are truly 100% genetic, but most things like Hashimoto's, there's a genetic component, but there's an environmental trigger that leads to that gene being expressed that turns on that autoimmune cascade. So it's like, let's focus on that and control the controllables and not bypass level 1 through level 60 of the video game and jump to level 61. You know what I mean?
No, it's such a good point. Is a GI map and a SIBO protocol really going to help you if, like you said, you're looking at chronometer and you're not eating half of the nutrients you need in a month's time, you know? Mm-hmm. Is the sleep supplement really going to help you long term if you're not hitting your minimum RDA of calcium, which is a mineral that's going to help you sleep and actually correct it from a root cause level? There's just so many things to look at. There's so many things to learn about your own behavior, the food journaling, the pattern recognition, what did I do today? What is the most pressing thing? What do I think triggered the symptom? What do I think I could do to make this thing better? There's so many questions to ask yourself first, for a practitioner to ask you before your body kind of gets looked at from a perspective all the way over there of a GI map. That's not looking at the person. That's looking at like one data point within this person from a detached lens. It's not asking why. There's so many whys to ask before. Because like you said, if you have digestive issues, you probably have SIBO or this or something. You don't necessarily even need that confirmed through a test. All you need to know is that qualitative data, which you talked about how much you love that, of my stomach hurts all the time. Cool. Let's ask 100 questions about that experience when it comes on. Is it cyclical? Could it be related to your menstrual cycle? Are there certain foods that make it worse or better? Does sleeping more help it? Like all these things, all these questions before going into this bacteria is off. Of course this bacteria is off. Your stomach hurts all the time.
And that's like, I see a lot in like the holistic space, where it's like, we act like we found the root causes, but they're almost like pseudo root causes. Yeah. It's like, oh, I found that, like, I'll give a personal example. Like for me, I identified like mold and candida were an issue for me. But what made me a hospitable host? What made me a hospitable host for that? Well, one was probably living in like 4 moldy apartments and growing up in a home with mold. Another was just being on tons of antibiotics. Yeah. And then also eating, like there was a point where my stomach issues were so bad, I thought the best thing for me was to just eat sweet potato and chicken breast because those were the foods that I could digest. And that is a double-edged sword. And I'm not saying there's not a time and a place to eliminate different things. Like we just talked about gluten, but it's like it's always a double-edged sword when you cut things out, because I was limiting my diet so much to sweet potato and chicken breast because that's what wasn't bloating me, but I was starving off the beneficial bacteria. And then that's problematic because that also can manifest. If we think of our gut like a garden, you have flowers and you have weeds, we want to feed the good guys.
Yeah.
And if you're not feeding the good guys, that makes you a hospitable host for every overgrowth under the sun. That made me a hospitable host for Candida because I had not enough of the good guys.
Yeah.
So it's like we have to look at it from a very holistic lens of not, oh, I have SIBO, how do I fix it? Oh, I have Candida, how do I fix it? Oh, I have parasites, how do I fix it? What has made you a hospitable host for those things in the first place? And that's why it's like taking a look at your whole history. And this can even be a really interesting way to connect with family members too. Like I love talking to my mom. Like I've even asked my mom, like, did you have metal fillings when you were pregnant with me? And she's like, yeah, I did.
Same
She's
with
like,
my mom.
Also, I ate shark when I was pregnant with with like you and your brother. I'm like, yeah, that probably wasn't a good
Shark?
Yeah, like the mercury.
Where did this woman find shark?
I don't know. All she told me is she's like, your dad made me shark when I was
with
pregnant.
both pregnancies. He just pulled out the shark.
Yeah.
Wild. I got to meet your dad.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
You're like, that's other part of my trauma.
Oh, yeah. It's a deep part of my trauma. But, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That explains. It's like, could there have been some heavy metals that were passed down from like mom to baby? Eating shark.
Eating shark and eating mercury fillings.
That's a really good point. Where did you find shark?
I have a lot of questions that we'll talk about after. So give us a case study of someone that you've worked with, that you've had a lot of success with. What did it look like working with them month to month? What did you start focusing on from the most foundational? And like, how did you kind of get them to where they are now?
Yeah. Okay. So my one client I worked with, I always start with food journaling, like we talked about. I want to get an inventory of like, what are you eating in a day? What does that look like? And let's get curious about different patterns there. And from there, I like to shine a light on different gaps that could be contributing to different imbalances. So I work with a lot of people. For example, this client was avoiding red meat because I don't want to raise my cholesterol. But meanwhile, though, by cutting out like red meat, we're also cutting out zinc. And so zinc's not coming in from other places. And so we're also inadvertently creating mineral deficiencies. And not to go on a tangent, but I see this with a lot of people where it's like, oh, I have PCOS, so I'm cutting out red meat because my cholesterol is high. And then I'm also going to cut out dairy because dairy flares me. And then I'm also going to cut out this because this. And I did my food sensitivity test and I cut out all these foods. And it's like we're inadvertently creating imbalances. And then your diet's so stripped. It's so stripped. There's nothing. There's chicken breast and sweet potato. And you're not going to get all of your vitamins and minerals eating chicken breast and sweet potato. It's just not going to happen. So this client I was working with, we focused heavily on like stabilizing her blood sugar. And I like to look at journaling from a micro lens and a macro lens. So macro is like, how much protein are you consuming? Okay, right off the bat, most people that are coming to me, even people who are eating clean, quote unquote, and gluten and dairy free, quote unquote, oftentimes are eating a high fat, high carb, low protein diet. And that's not a way that you can eat to support blood sugar. Like that macro ratio just will not work.
Yeah.
And so that macro ratio needs to be tweaked right off the bat. That's something that we can change. That's very macro. That's very big picture, very zoomed out. And then I can see, okay, maybe we're eating a lot of leafy greens, but leafy greens are not that high in fiber. Like kale and spinach and arugula. We love kale and spinach and arugula. Not that much fiber though. And so maybe we increase fiber consumption based on that food journal. Or maybe I notice we're actually not eating any sardines or salmon or oysters or like omega-3s. Maybe we add an omega-3 supplement or we add in fish a couple times a week. Like we're looking for gaps and trying to identify those. And then from more of a micro perspective, micro in my mind is like looking at ingredients, looking at micronutrients, like looking for different deficiencies that might be present. And so kind of just eyeballing it of like, okay, I actually see no potassium, like no potassium. And so for people listening, like again, potassium's a macro mineral. You find potassium in potatoes. I'm a potato stan. Potato stan. And it makes me so sad that people are so scared to eat a potato when it's such a good source of potassium, such a good source of fiber. If you think about it, it's kind of like a thyroid multivitamin and an adrenal
Potatoes
multivitamin.
They're unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. And they taste great. I love a little baked potato, and I'll put cottage cheese on top of that and do like a loaded cottage cheese baked potato. Favorite little high protein, high fiber snack. So I just think that we do food journaling to kind of identify patterns and look at things from, again, the micro lens is like, let's look at ingredient labels. Let's look at ingredient lists. Let's see if there's any, like, are we consuming, and most people coming to me are not sitting on the couch eating Cheetos. Like most people coming to me are not eating an ultra processed foods diet, but sometimes there is some cleaning up we want to do in just terms of being more conscious of ingredients and reading labels. And so that's more so the micro lens. And I find a mistake people make is they go way too micro. And that's what I did, like way too micro at the beginning of my journey, where I'm like, well, I'm eating gluten-free. I'm not eating seed oils, not eating dairy. Why am I still struggling? I'm eating so clean. But girl, you're eating like 300 grams of carbs and like 20 grams of protein and like a high fat, high carb, low protein diet. That is not going to work, even if you're eating clean, even if you're eating gluten and dairy free.
Yeah.
So with that client, like I had a client come to me and she was eating like very low protein, but tons of sourdough. And so for her, like that gluten was a trigger for her, like a massive, massive trigger. And that's where it's very bio-individual. Some people do great with sourdough. Like if you're having no problems, then don't listen to me. Like, don't listen to me if you're having no problems in your health. But I feel like so many people listening to this podcast are looking for answers. So we found that like she had very clear signs of insulin resistance, of like irregular cycles, really intense sugar cravings, like very not unexplained weight gain. That's the wrong way to put it, but just like stuff like weight loss resistance, where she was working out, she was eating clean, she was doing a lot of the right things. And so for her, just shifting her macro ratio, just a little bit, just little tweaks of like, let's up the protein. Let's actually not go low carb, but let's bring the carbs down a little bit, up the protein. Maybe we lower the fat just a little bit, and just shifting macro ratios. That was really beneficial for her. So we started with that. And then I also send out like a literal 300 question intake form that goes into very niche, very specific symptoms. And so it asks like, do you have white spots on your nails? Do you have vertical ridges on your nails? Because those can be signs of like zinc deficiency. I'm always looking at people's nails. Even my boyfriend, I'm like, I see a white spot on your nails.
I have a whole blog post about what signs on your nails mean. So I'm going to put it in the show notes. Yeah.
And I'm always that person that's like looking at people's nails. I'm like, you might need more zinc.
So after you do the food journaling with them, then I switch around diet.
Yep.
Then
we go into like that very niche questionnaire because it's qualitative data. So I think so often we get so almost obsessive over labs and like, what does like, and I think there's a time and a place to get lab work. I'm the biggest advocate for like getting lab work ran and advocating for yourself. But at the same time, even if your lab work looks normal, if your symptoms are not normal, you need to listen to your symptoms.
Yeah.
And so often I like to say our body's speaking Spanish, and it's like, but I don't speak Spanish. Like, what are you trying to tell me, body? Because you're yelling at me and you're trying to tell me a lot, but I don't know how to speak the language of your body. So hiring a coach is like hiring an interpreter of like, oh, this is what that means.
This symptom could mean that.
Yes.
And to your point, when it's only qualitative, when it's only a symptom before it shows up on your lab work, you're lucky because that's actually when you can turn it around.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're taking stock of those symptoms. You're saying, oh, even though we made these changes in her diet, this symptom's still present. So it might be that she needs extra of this nutrient, or it might mean that she could use these herbs in some way, or it might mean that she could use like this practice, like whatever it is. You're kind of like matching their symptoms to perhaps deeper issues, deeper root cause issues. Okay.
It's like if I have a client coming to me who's uncomfortably bloated, incomplete evacuations, like not fully emptying, and they're bloated after every single thing they're eating, and they're losing hair. I'm like, okay, there's something going on in the gut that's impacting absorption, and that how is your hair going to grow if you're not absorbing nutrition? Your hair is low on the totem pole in terms of priority for your body. Like minerals and vitamins are going to go to the most essential places. You're going to die if your liver stops working, but you're not going to die if your hair falls out. And I know that's like very crass to say for people who it's a very like debilitating. It impacts your self-confidence when you're losing hair. I've gone through it. But when you think about it that way, it's like your hair's like the overflow of minerals. Your hair's like the overflow of vitamins. So if you're not absorbing, because absorption happens in the gut, well, how are you going to, of course your nails are brittle. Of course your hair's falling out. Of course your skin is dry because you're not absorbing nutrition in the gut. So that's where we try to connect everything to those symptoms. And again, working with a practitioner should be like, again, your body's speaking Spanish and you're like, I don't know how to speak Spanish. Like, I don't know what this means and I don't know what that means. But it's like starting to decode what those symptoms could mean.
I love that. Okay, so the last thing I want us to talk about is neurodivergence and ADHD.
Yeah.
And taking steps to improve your health while living in a brain with ADHD. You and I both have ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was like 14 or 15. I tried Vyvanse and Adderall, and it just, the sadness and like rage that I felt at the end of the day coming down from Adderall just didn't make the productivity worth it for me. Yeah. I think, for some people it like changes their lives. Yeah. I couldn't handle the come down every night. And like if I took a weekend off, it was like completely depressed.
Wow.
Yeah. So I can't medicate for ADHD because I just don't.
So we're just both out here raw dogging the ADHD.
We are. And I've really learned to live with my brain.
Yeah.
And, I mean, my house is a mess.
Yeah, same. You should see my Airbnb right now. It looks like a tornado went off.
But we execute really well on things that we're hyper passionate about, which is like the two swings of it. So this is something I got a lot of questions about when I had posted a question box this morning. People wanted to know your hacks for taking the needed steps to walk the body back to health when you are ADHD.
It's so challenging. And I think what I like to do with clients, and I'll even coach myself, I like to give myself good, like bare minimum. What are the things I need to do to take care of myself on a bare minimum day? Better and then best. Because I love the thick morning routine is what I call it. Like thick with 3 C's and a Q morning routine where you're like getting up at 5 a.m, you're going to the gym, and then you go home and you take a cold shower, and then you like make a high protein breakfast. Like we love that, but that's not like always realistic or practical on an everyday basis. So I like to set like, what is a bare minimum day for me? Like, and that's where I want people to think about, because I feel like with ADHD, like you can have days you're super on top of it and you're crushing it and you're the most productive person that's ever lived. And you're like, oh my God, who is she? And then you can have other days where you are like, it's just hard to feed yourself. It's hard to just like,
you sometimes make the mistake of thinking you're always going to be that person when you're in the like productive stage, and you're like, oh, I fixed it now. Look, this is me. Yeah, right. The problem is that a normal person's brain, I don't even know if like there are normal humans anymore. I think a lot of us are now like being born neurodivergent, and I also think it's like it's something that maybe it's a response to the world. Like the world needs neurodivergent brains to like have empathy back and like fix the planet. But spiritual aside, a quote normal brain just kind of has like a steady amount of common sense and motivation and executive function each day. And it's not like a ton and it's not too little, but it's just like enough to like keep a running household and like to-do list. And in an ADHD brain, our experience is like sometimes you are so insanely high functioning and your brain is working at 1,000,000 miles an hour and you can accomplish so much more than you ever thought possible. And you move the needle in like 6 different projects in your life and organize your whole home. And that's when you're kind of in like the high cortisol part of ADHD. And then you hit the low cortisol, like burnout phase of ADHD. And you can't feed yourself properly for weeks. So I think a lot of it is about anticipating those patterns and knowing that they're coming. Yeah. And planning ahead for the girl who's going to be laid out in bed.
And that's like something I'll even do. I have to be very structured with how I plan even like food for the week. And so I have to think about, okay, when I have those burnout days or low energy days where it's just hard to feed myself, what can I stock my pantry with? What can I stock my refrigerator with that I can make a meal in 2 minutes if I need to? That's nutrient dense and that's actually fueling my body. That's not like ultra processed. And so something I've been making lately, I'll do like 2 cans of sardines in a bowl because it's like 40 grams of protein. I don't have to cook it. I'll mash it up. I'll add like honey Dijon or like a like a ground mustard, and then I'll just chuck in, like, I'll have veggies pre-chopped. That's another hack, is like, I love to, you can even buy like washed and chopped vegetables if you really need to. I'll set aside 20 minutes when I come home from the grocery store, and before I even put anything away, it's like, I'm going to chop some cabbage. I'm going to have this washed and chopped and put it in glass containers so I can see, and I can just throw that into a bowl.
Yeah.
And you're taking the number of steps out. Because for people with ADHD, it's like, well, I gotta make sure I have a clean dish, and then I have to chop this and wash this and prep this, and like, oh, but that went bad, and now I don't have this ingredient. And it's like, your brain is a prison sometimes, like a literal prison. So it's like taking the number of steps out of the equation. Like, maybe you wash and chop some cucumbers and you put it in a mason jar so you can visually see it in your refrigerator.
The visual piece.
Yes.
Oh my God. I will literally write on a Post-it note sometimes on top of my fridge, like, here's what's inside. Like, here's meal ingredients if you want to throw something together.
Yeah. I do the same thing. I have like a little whiteboard on my refrigerator that says like what's in it, because then I feel so guilty when I'm throwing things away and I'm like, oh, I don't want to waste food. But for example, like, I'll make a sardine bowl for lunch, and I'll have 2 cans of sardines, honey mustard, because if you don't like sardines and you want to get in because that's a nutrient dense superfood that costs 99 cents a can, like so inexpensive. And I'll add like purple cabbage and maybe some broccoli sprouts, mix that all up. Maybe I'll have like a pre-made, like, I shop at Aldi. Do you guys have Aldi here in New York? I'm a big Aldi girly.
Okay.
And so they have like organic brown rice quinoa, like pre-made in little bags. And so I'll heat that up, chuck that in a little sardine bowl, mix it all up. And then maybe I'll take like blue corn chips and like dip that in the sardine.
Delicious.
Like, so good. And I just got 40 grams of protein. I got potassium and like the cruciferous veggies for the liver, like so good for the liver, for the with the cabbage and the broccoli sprouts. I just got in such a nutrient dense lunch that I just made in like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, which is why on my TikTok, I started a series called No Cook Meals. And I need to be better about actually posting that, because it's like, let's come up with no cook meals. I know I'm the queen of starting series on TikTok, and I'm like, oh, I forgot to continue that. But like, having things that are no cook or like minimal effort, like maybe that means buying a rotisserie chicken that's like already made from the grocery store. And it may not be perfect, but it's like eating that is better than like skipping meals or eating something that's ultra processed, right? Or maybe that means like, I'm a big like tinned fish girly. I love sardines, love oysters, love like quick. And sometimes I try to limit tuna because of mercury. Safe Catch tuna, I'll do that a lot because that's like a lower mercury brand. And so I'll like throw that in a bowl with like a little bit of mayo and like some veggies and maybe like a little brown rice type of thing. Or I'll meal prep potatoes, like, and just have those like in little containers, and I'll pull those out as like a quick potassium source. So it's like,
I think we could be getting too in the weeds with examples.
Yeah.
So I feel like the example that you gave of the tinned fish with the honey mustard was perfect.
Okay.
Let's take a little bit more big picture.
Okay.
The hacks, like writing things on the outside of the fridge of here's what I have inside. I think a big problem for people with ADHD as well is things feel so overwhelming to our brains.
Yeah.
And it's the starting that's the hard part, because we can't see necessarily like each step that will get us to the finish line.
Yeah.
But sometimes once we start, those steps start to be revealed.
Yes.
So it's also just like kind of starting at the easiest entry point. Like you said, maybe that's like, okay, I'm not going to cook a whole dinner, but maybe I'll start by chopping this veggie. And sometimes when you chop that veggie, you're like, you know what? I might as well throw some meat on the stove. Okay, I might as well do this. And it's almost kind of like having to trick yourself into an entry point.
Because it's the executive dysfunction. It's like actually starting the task. Have you ever used Pomodoro method?
No.
You need to.
Tell me.
That would help you. As a business owner, that would be so amazing for you. So Pomodoro method is where and I have a time cube that I keep on my counter. So you set a 25-minute timer and you're like, I'm only going to work on this task for 25 minutes. And then I get a 5-minute break after the 25 minutes. And so the Pomodoros are 4 circles that you draw on a piece of paper. And each circle you check off is a 25-minute timer. So you do 25 minutes, 5-minute break, check. 25 minutes, 5-minute break, check. And you repeat that 4 times. And then once you get to 4 Pomodoros, you get to take a 20-minute, a 30-minute break. And that's when I'll do like a little walk, or I'll give myself like maybe I will indulge in some scrolling. Like I'll give myself just a little break. And that allows me to like, I don't know why that works so well with ADHD, but I'll do that a lot when I'm cooking because I feel like I can lose track of time too. Like it's very difficult to get started. But then I'm like, oh, I just spent 3 hours in the kitchen. Like I just spent way too much time, like lost all concept of time. So I'm the biggest fan. Like Pomodoro method is like my favorite.
Wow.
And like, I didn't come up with that, but still, I've just found that to be like such a beneficial tool for me. And like, even for clients that come to me with ADHD, like it just helps you get started. Cause you're like, I only have to do this for 25 minutes.
I love that. What are some other hacks when it comes to our actual wellness practices or like even gaps that you see when it comes to ADHD girls and health?
I think one of the most powerful things that I have utilized that I think can be really beneficial for people, because I think it's really hard too with social media. Social media is designed to keep us hooked, to keep us scrolling and scrolling for longer. And like, that's the whole like business model is like, how long can we keep someone on the platform? And so it's designed. Yeah, it's like it's designed in a way that's it's very challenging and it acts on the reward centers of our brain. So I have to set boundaries with social media, and I'll be honest, I think people with ADHD need much stronger boundaries with your routine and social media than maybe the average person. Because I see my boyfriend, he can open up his phone first thing in the morning. He has no problems for the rest of the day. If I get a hit of dopamine from social media first thing in the morning, it is feral toddler energy for the whole day. It's like, I need sugar. I need more social media. I need more sugar. I need more caffeine. Oh my gosh, why do I want a second or third cup of caffeine today? Oh, it's because I went on social media literally before I could open my eyeballs.
So this is like a low dopamine morning routine. Why is a low dopamine morning routine so important for girls with ADHD and also just people with chronic illness, period?
So I'll speak from my own personal experience. Personally, what I've observed is that if I start my day off with like high dopamine of social media, caffeine immediately, maybe that's like going out to get a coffee because it's like buying something and like getting the caffeine, getting the little bit of sugar in the caffeine, like just starting your day off immediately with dopamine. I have found personally that I am dopamine seeking throughout the entirety of the day. And so to your point, starting and stopping tasks, that's hard now. Putting on shoes, that's challenging now. Taking a shower, that feels like a chore. Like simple things that come easily to the average person, that feels like an insurmountable task. When I'm starting my day off with dopamine, it's like I just want more. Like it's almost like setting the baseline for dopamine,
because we
and
got
then you're
the pleasure too easily.
Yes,
that's the problem. We started the day off where it's like we didn't have to work for the pleasure.
Yes,
and I think I found the same thing for me. It's my day is so much better when I start off by doing a hard thing to set the tone that way of like, oh wait, the hard thing got me a different kind of pleasure, and that feels good. So I'm going to continue to do the hard things.
Yeah, and I also think dopamine is very misunderstood because it's not that dopamine inherently is bad. It's like how quickly we get it. You know what I mean? Because like you can get dopamine from exercise. Like that's a good thing to get dopamine from. But if I'm getting dopamine like instantly from social media.
We don't want free dopamine. You want dopamine that you have to pay for.
Yeah.
And I don't mean monetarily.
Mm-hmm.
Dopamine you have to pay for with effort.
Yeah.
It's free dopamine that's an issue. It's a frictionless society and like overabundance of things that can get tricky because that's just not how our brains were designed. Our brains were designed to have challenge. We need that. Without that, we feel chaotic and a little sad.
Yeah. And I just think going back to like boundaries, I think like I have to have and again, maybe someone who doesn't have a neurodivergent brain, maybe they don't need as stronger boundaries and they're fine and they have no issues. For me, I need very, very strong boundaries with social media. I have an app I use. Have you heard of the Opal app? It's like not sponsored, but I use them, and it's a blocker that you can block. Like I have it blocked in the morning. Like I fit. It's such a strong blocker too. Like I cannot, because I'm very strong. I'm like I can get past the apps usually. I can't get on social media before 9 a.m. It's like literally impossible, and I can't go on social media past 8 p.m. So I set it. And then that creates a boundary like with that social media. And I think so often we're like, oh, boundaries with work, boundaries with friends, boundaries with, what about boundaries with your phone? Because that inherently, going back to health, okay, why are you talking about this, Fiona? Because the most inherent, it's so ironic when we're learning about nervous system regulation and stress management and meditation and working through trauma. It's so funny that content is on social media, because social media is the most inherently dysregulating thing that's out there. And it's like, I'm learning how to regulate my social media. I'm learning how to regulate my nervous system on TikTok. It's like TikTok's the most dysregulating app, and you're learning how to regulate your nervous system on the most dysregulating app. Like, that is so ironic.
Yeah.
It's so ironic. So it's like, even taking inventory, it's like, that's where, again, people want to surpass level 1 through level 60 of the video game, jump to level 61. Maybe when you're doing your food and mood journal, maybe you also take inventory of your screen time. Maybe you look in your phone and say, okay, how much time am I spending on social media? And not feeling guilty about it, but asking yourself, getting curious. Where can I set some boundaries with this? Because that is inherently dysregulating. You can't regulate your nervous system while you're sitting on social media all day long. And I get it, because I'm a dopamine seeking human.
I completely feel you. I think that's a very important part of the health journey that we don't want to necessarily address, but we have to. It's actually, you could replace 10 supplements by putting your phone down. It's actually insane. And you can save a lot of nutrients, because we actually use up our nutrients to be on social media. It's like, using a lot of sparks there to pay attention and to get stimulated. And like, those sparks have, minerals that kind of create those brain chemicals and that attention.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for all of these tangible tips
for having me.
and just having a realistic health and wellness conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This was awesome.
You're such a refreshing human. Can you please let us know how we can find you and how we can work with you?
Yeah. So I would say the best place, probably just my Instagram, which is just heal.with.fifi. I'm also on TikTok. So if you like the ADHD stuff and like different recipes and hacks like that, I post a lot of that on TikTok. And also my Instagram, like, I encourage people to go through my highlights, because I have a lot of free content there. I have like a gut health highlight. I have a nervous system regulation highlight. I have a lot of information that people can dig into that are like free resources.
When we're not locked out of our screen time.
Yeah,
obviously.
when you're not locked out of your screen time because you're using your social media blocker. But on my Instagram, there's like a link in my bio, and that takes you to everything, like client applications, working with me, all of that kind of stuff.
I love it. I'll put it all in the show notes for sure. Thanks,
Awesome.
Fiona.
Thank you
You're
for
a true
having me.
joy.
Thank you.
I love it.
Wasn't that great?